Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name's Ivana if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is July the 28th. It is Wednesday. We have made it halfway through the week. We're almost there. So I thought that today would be a good day in the middle of the week to update you on where we stand in terms of vaccines. Now, this is important for several reasons. One, because we have some pretty interesting data to show you. I'm going to share my screen and put that data up here in just a minute. But before we get to that, you might recognize this space. I am joined by our own data reporter, Ramsey Archibald. And again, he has made these charts that are very interesting, and they really show what might be some changing numbers in Alabama's vaccination rates. Now, we know that Alabama is the least vaccinated state in the nation against COVID-19. We also know that there is no county that is above 40% of its population fully vaccinated against COVID-19. So with those numbers that we keep in mind, we also know COVID cases are rising, hospitalizations are rising, lots because of this Delta variant. So we're going to pull up these maps in a second. Before we get to that, I do want to let all of you know, if you do have questions about the coronavirus vaccines, we have set up a new email address at AL.com, and that is vaccines@AL.com. So vaccines, plural, with an S, at AL.com. Send us your questions about coronavirus vaccines. We will find the right professionals to answer your questions. If it's medical question, for example, we will find a medical doctor, and etc. So send your questions there. I will remind you of that email address here again at the end of the show. But let's just go ahead and dive into this data. Now, Ramsey, I'm going to go ahead. I've got several different maps here. I'm going to pull up one. And this is one that I find one of the most interesting. Now, this is the average new vaccine recipients since the 1st of July. Now, that's July 1 to today, which is the 28th, almost a full month. Now, what's interesting to me about this graph is this top line, this kind of light blue line. I put my mouse on it to try to make it stand out a little bit more. And that is the one dose line. So Ramsey, explain to us exactly what that means and kind of why this graph is important.
Yeah. So like you said, that is the 7-day average of basically people who have received at least one dose in Alabama. And what that is the increase. So each day, the number of people who get their first dose goes up, by a certain amount. This is the average over about a week. And you can see at the end of this month, the most recent data available, which came out yesterday, shows an uptick in people getting their first shot. And so right now in Alabama, there are 3 vaccines you can get for the coronavirus, 2 of them, and they're by far the most common, which are the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. Both require 2 shots. So you can see some people have started their series who hadn't yet up to this point.
And that, again, and I'll go back and kind of make this one stand out a little bit more. This is that, again, 7-day one dose. And as Ramsey said, it kind of shows those people who maybe had not decided to get their first dose, maybe had not decided to get the vaccine at all until very recently. Now, I'm not sure if you can see where my cursor is, but that last kind of valley in that top line graph was the 23rd. That was Friday. So since Friday, you can see, again, Ramsey mentioned we only get this data from ADPH twice a week. I believe we get it on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So from Thursday to Tuesday is what this data shows. Now, that last line from that bottom valley going up towards my right-hand side of the screen here really shows that kind of big increase there. Now, Ramsey, I know there's no way to directly correlate that to one thing or another, but we do know that coronavirus cases have been rising. Our officials have been worried about it. So that line right there, I just wonder if officials find that surprising or if that is kind of what they were expecting as more cases started being reported.
Well, I mean, I can't speak to what surprises them, but I know that officials all over Alabama for months now have been urging people to get the vaccine. So I think it isn't shocking that an increase in cases would lead to people finally deciding to get it. One thing I will say about this particular chart is that this data actually comes from the CDC. So it's a little bit different from the ADPH data, but it comes from the same place. So that's what's important.
So we know, again, this one just shows July. I'm going to give you a little bit more of a kind of fuller view, we'll say. Now, it takes me 2 seconds to pull up this other graph, so bear with me here. But while I do this, I want to say I've got a comment here from Grace who says that it is the halfway through the last week of summer break. Now, I know that many people like Grace are probably working in education or have children that are in schools and are about to go back to school. So we have been keeping an eye on all of those stories revolving around schools, masks, coronavirus in schools. We will have those on AL.com. But Grace, enjoy your last half week of summer break. I know all of our teachers are probably in that same boat. So here is that other graph we were talking about, Ramsey, and this is the one that gives a little bit fuller of a picture. So kind of tell us what we are looking at here and what we can tell from looking at this map.
Yeah, so you can see this is the average number of vaccine doses administered per day. So while the other one was looking at the number of people vaccinated, this one's just strictly looking at doses, so shots in arms. And you can see, we're still nowhere near the level we were kind of in the middle of that vaccine rollout earlier in the spring. I think the numbers back then were peaked at about 40,000 jabs given per day. Right now, it's just about 9,000, or it was earlier this week, which is actually an uptick from what we were seeing, earlier in July and towards the end of June, when really vaccines kind of plateaued at a pretty low number. It's not a huge uptick, but it is an uptick, and it's really one of the first upticks we've seen since, the numbers started to decline earlier this year.
Now, I have an interesting comment here from Pam, and I would love to hear more about this, Pam. And she says, my husband and I got our first Moderna shot on Sunday. She said it took 11 months to make our decision, but now we are confident in that decision. So, Pam, I think that's really interesting. And I think especially judging from this graph and that other graph that kind of zoomed in a little bit more on July, shows that a lot of people are in your same boat. For whatever reason, they did not make a decision until recently to get their vaccines, and then they decided to go out. Now, Ramsey, I'm not sure if you can see it on this graph, but tell us about, we had a day pretty recently that was one of the most popular days, we'll say, for getting vaccines since May. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the data shows that as far as doses administered, so remember this could be a first dose, a second dose, it doesn't really discriminate. On July 23rd, so that was last Friday, 13,684 doses were administered according to ADPH data. And that is the most since May, I believe, and by a pretty significant margin. And the day before, on Thursday, also topped 10,000 doses administered, almost 11,000. And we haven't had 2 consecutive days over 10,000 in quite a long time. So it's, clearly we're seeing some people deciding to go get shots.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned those days. So if you go back and you look at some of these are averages again, or we can move back to this other one of doses administered. Kind of in early June, we were really, even if we were doing better, it was still not over, like you said, that 13,000 mark. We had some in June that actually were about as low as just a couple of hundred. So it really, that data really started to shift recently. And we could see that from both of these graphs. Now, I'm not sure if people can see, there's another graph behind this line on the one I'm showing right now. You can find all of these in Ramsey's story on AL.com. They are interactive, so you click on it and that line will pop out and show you different numbers and different information. But Ramsey, you can really see that when vaccines started becoming widely available and easily available, people got them, and then there was a drop off after that. And now, again, for reasons we cannot directly correlate, we see a little bit of that rise. And it is interesting, again, on Friday, 13,700 doses administered. And I believe you said Thursday, there were over 10,000 doses administered. And that is the most in a day since late May. So a lot of things happening there on that front and are very interesting. Now, can we tell which counties this is happening in, Ramsey? Can we tell which counties people have been getting vaccinated in mostly over the past week or so?
Yeah, so the data isn't perfect on that, but we can definitely see where some of these doses are coming from, the new doses administered. And it's sort of what you would expect when you're looking at raw numbers. Alabama's biggest counties are obviously going to they have way more people, so you're more likely to see an increase there. So Jefferson County, between updates, so the numbers updated on Tuesday from ADPH, and the previous update was last Thursday. So in the days between those two updates, Jefferson added about 2,600 new doses, which was by far the most. Madison County, which is where Huntsville is, added about 1,500 or so. Mobile County added 1,400. And those were the only counties that added more than 1,000 doses. But when you control for population, you can see a few other counties made pretty significant strides. Bibb County is a pretty small county south of Birmingham. Only about 22,000 people live there, but they administered 172 new doses, which when you control for population, that's pretty significantly more than any other county in the state between updates, so basically in the last 4 or 5 days. So
now I'm pulling up, I'm sorry, Ramsey. I'm pulling up this county map. So if you do have a question about your county, we can look at that and give you that information as well. But while we wait on some of those questions to roll in, I will ask you, Ramsey, I've got a question here from Reggie, and I kind of wonder the same thing. Reggie says, this is a little bit encouraging. I really like to see Ramsey's graphs and data mapping to help see the big picture on this and other things happening in Birmingham and in Alabama. So Ramsey, I happen to agree with them. I love seeing this data. I love seeing these graphs. But I also want to ask something that he kind of mentioned in the beginning. He said, this data looks kind of encouraging. Now, you have been mapping this data for what feels like forever at this point. But since COVID really took off here in Alabama last spring, what do you look at when you see that graph and when you see that increase over the vaccine doses over the last few days? What does that tell you as somebody who has been vigilantly keeping up with this data?
Yeah, I would say encouraging is, it's certainly not discouraging. I would call it sort of a cautious optimism. Like I said earlier, it's not a huge increase. Like, we're not suddenly seeing 40,000 people per day getting vaccinated, and Alabama is still last in the country in total vaccination. But if we're going to see an increase, it'll start here with what we're talking about today, which is people going to get their first shot. And we're actually 5th from the bottom, which isn't necessarily anything to celebrate, but it's not last in that metric. So I would say, we're making some kind of movement towards increasing that vaccination number, which is key. And I would like to see the trend continue.
Looking at some of these questions, and they're all great questions. I've got one person saying, look, maybe that's related to the July 21st announcement. I'm not exactly sure, Amanda, which announcement you're referring to, but when we do look at that data, let's look at what's happened since Thursday. We know we have had several officials, including the governor, come out and really very strongly, I think it's fair to say, advocate for vaccines and to tell unvaccinated people to get their shots. We also know that the data has been rising on people who have been getting COVID in Alabama, and also hospitalizations. I believe they are now over 900 people hospitalized with COVID in the state of Alabama from those hospitals reporting. So there's been kind of a lot of things come out over the last week, Ramsey. While we can't correlate this directly to one cause, there's been a lot of information. There has been a lot of COVID talk over the last week, we can say.
Yeah, and I would actually say hospitalizations are actually over 1,000 now for the first time since, I think, February, and they're actually near 1,100, and they're increasing pretty rapidly. I know that's not exactly what we're talking about today, but it's very troubling here in the state of Alabama.
Questions again. Reggie says, I haven't seen information about public vaccination states that are still open. Do you have that information? Yes, Reggie, we do have that information. We will get it to you. Hang on here a little bit after our show, and I will get you those links. And if I have a producer around now who can do that, that would be great. But Reggie, we do have it. We'll get it to you. Now, also questions from Christina, and she just says, look, it's COVID rising again in Alabama, and she says she's in Baldwin County, she's in Gulf Shores. So I don't have that data in front of me. I do know we have it available. Off the top of your head, Ramsey, do you know how things are looking in Baldwin County?
Well, I know that Alabama's coast, so Mobile and Baldwin County, are at the heart of this current COVID spike. I reported today, Mobile currently has its highest 7-day average for new cases since the pandemic began. So that's higher than it was in January and December in that winter surge that we saw. And Baldwin is right there with it, just slightly lower than its winter peak. So both of those counties are kind of at the very heart of Alabama's what we are calling the third wave or the Delta wave. And as far as vaccinations go, we're not seeing a huge uptick in those areas, especially when you control for population. So as far as vaccinations, I can't really speak too strongly to where those counties are at the moment. But case-wise, it's not looking good in either of those places.
Question from Debbie, and there was somebody else that had made this comment as well. We do know that vaccinated people can get COVID. They can get this Delta variant that is extra contagious. We know highly contagious, I should say. And we do know that our officials, and meaning our officials, our governor, Alabama Department of Public Health, have said, look, the vaccines are designed to prevent serious illness and hospitalization. But again, we do know breakthrough cases happen. I believe that's something Debbie is asking. And she says, look, who's keeping up with those cases? Ramsey, do we know if the Alabama Department of Public Health is keeping up with breakthrough cases, which are, again, if that's a weird word, that just means people who are vaccinated and who have contracted COVID-19?
As far as breakthrough cases go, I haven't seen any data yet on those, but we know a lot about breakthrough hospitalizations and deaths so far. And both hospitalizations and deaths, which kind of represent that serious illness threshold, are the vast majority of those are among unvaccinated people. So I think, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I believe it was between 94 and 96%, if not higher, of hospitalizations recently are among unvaccinated people. And I think the number was even higher for deaths since April. So we know that there are going to be breakthrough cases. We knew that when these vaccines came out. The efficacy numbers aren't 100% effective. And with a more transmissible strain like Delta, we're bound to see some breakthroughs. But I think the early returns as far as serious illness are quite encouraging on the vaccines.
Questions again on the county. We're going to get back to that county map in just a second. Before I get there, there was one question that I did want to answer, and that is, if I can find it, you know what, we're going to go ahead and pull up that map while I look for that question. And somebody did ask what the coloring means on this map. And Ramsey, correct me if I'm wrong, but the darker the county is on this map, the more vaccinated that county is.
Yes, that's correct. And this particular color scheme is for percent of the total population of the county that is fully vaccinated against COVID-19.
Now, questions here from Jason and Katie. These are about the same question. And it's a good question. And she says, do we know what percentage of these cases, I'm assuming the new cases, these Delta variant cases, are reinfections, or are they people who have never had COVID-19?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer to that right now, but I will try to find out.
We will put that, Jason and Katie both, we will put that with our group of questions. We're, again, getting to that vaccines at AL.com question list. We're making a master list of questions to get to professionals. So we'll make sure to add that to our list of questions, because that's an interesting one. So looking at this map, again, darker the green, the more vaccinated. If you have a county that you want to ask about, let us know. In the meantime, I do know somebody had asked about Baldwin County. So I'm going to pull that up. Baldwin County, you can see here, percent fully vaccinated is 30.4%. Now, Ramsey, looking at this map, just at the coloring, that seems kind of an average of a lot of counties in Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much right in the middle. There are a few counties that are higher, especially, and we've seen this sort of since the beginning. Several Black Belt counties are among the highest vaccinated in the state, including, I believe, Lowndes County is number one at 38.1% of its total population fully vaccinated. But yeah, 30 is kind of in the middle. It's a little bit below the state average, which I believe is about 34% right now. But yeah, among counties, it's really right there in the middle.
And again, we have had people that I've heard saying, oh, Jefferson County is the most populated county, but it is very much more vaccinated than a lot of counties. And, you know, Ramsey, they are pretty vaccinated in Jefferson County, but they're not really a whole lot different. Percent fully vaccinated is 37%. Percentage with at least one dose is 46.3%. But again, fully vaccinated, they still haven't hit that 40% mark in Jefferson County.
That's true. And I think it's important to note that you look at this map and Jefferson County really pops as being kind of green. And so do places like Madison County, which is home to Huntsville, like we said earlier. But when you look at it nationally, that 37% fully vaccinated in Jefferson County is really low compared to most of the country. You know, there's states in New England, I think Vermont is now number one in the nation, and they're above 70% fully vaccinated for the whole state. You know, they have a relatively small population compared to Alabama, but it's important to keep that context in mind. But I think an important number when you're looking at Jefferson County is, they're at 37% fully vaccinated, but the percent with one dose has been going up, and they're above some of the other counties as far as percent of the population with at least one dose at 46.3% now. That's ahead of Madison, ahead of Shelby, which is just to the south, ahead of several counties in the Black Belt, which are above. So you could see in the coming weeks, if that trend holds, you would expect Jefferson to rise as far as percent fully vaccinated.
That's interesting. I'm getting a lot of requests for counties, so we're going to start popping through them. This is Hale County. I believe it was Tasha, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing your name, asked about Hale County. Hale County is about 37% fully vaccinated, which is interesting, Ramsey, because it's about the same as Jefferson County.
Yeah, it's true. Hale also has a significantly smaller population than Jefferson, obviously. But I mean, like I said, some of those Black Belt area counties, which Hale is in the Black Belt, have been doing better than the state as a whole throughout much of the vaccine rollout.
Now, we had questions about Etowah County from Allen. Etowah County, a little bit lower than Hale and Jefferson County, a good bit lower, I should say, actually. Percent fully vaccinated, 28.9%. And percent of people with at least one dose is 34.8%. Now, before I keep going in some of these counties, Ramsey, let's make a quick note that while on that first map, we saw that vaccinations for those first doses have risen in the last week, currently, we do not have information to correlate those new doses to the county that they were received in. Is that right?
Not one-to-one, so not exact correlation, but we can see where some of the new doses are coming in the fastest, or at least in the highest numbers. And like we said, that's more about doses rather than people, so they're slightly different numbers. But I would look for places like Bibb and Conecuh County to see an increase in vaccinations among people relatively soon in the coming weeks. Same with places like Bullock and Lowndes, which are already doing well. Montgomery, Jefferson, they're all kind of in that top 10 as far as new vaccinations per capita over the last week. And going back to Etowah, I just wanted to note they are going to be interesting to watch in the coming weeks because Gadsden, which is in Etowah County, announced one of the first state's first vaccine incentives in the coming weeks. I think they are offering $100 if you get vaccinated. So it'll be interesting to see if that actually works there.
Well, and we know there's another vaccine incentive that's from the ADPH, and that's a TikTok contest. Now, if you are on TikTok, if that is your thing, then you might want to look into that. They are offering some gift cards for winners there. Now, a question on Madison County. Madison County is kind of on that same line as Jefferson County with the percent fully vaccinated at 37.5%. And again, percent with one dose, 44.3%. So keep in mind that this data is going to change a little bit as time goes on from people who have gotten that first dose, get their second dose, and move into that different category of percent fully vaccinated. Just something to keep in mind. Also got a question on St. Clair County. And St. Clair County is, again, a little bit lower. It is a little bit more in line, I believe, with Etowah that we just looked at, Ramsey, and that percent fully vaccinated is at 28.1%.
Yep. And one thing that you can look at that sort of tells you, it's not exact, but you can sort of see how a place is trending, is if that percent with at least one dose is much higher than the percent fully vaccinated, then you can sort of expect the bottom number to catch up in the coming weeks, because that indicates that more people are kind of in between shots. But when the numbers are closer together, remember that at least one dose includes those who are fully vaccinated. So that's people who are both fully vaccinated or only have one dose. So when those numbers are farther apart, you can expect maybe a little bit of correction in the coming weeks.
Interesting. Now, I will ask you quickly, Ramsey, where are you getting this information? We have a lot of people questioning this data. Can you tell them? Now, I know this is a map that you put together through a service that you use, a software, I should say, but where did the numbers come from that you have used? Where did the data come from?
The numbers for this map all came from the Alabama Department of Public Health. So state of Alabama, basically.
And questions about the comments here, comments that have any sort of Volatile comments with foul language, et cetera, are not tolerated on AL.com. So that is why if your comment, we have several people asking where their comment went, that could be why there. Please keep it civil in these comments. Please express your opinion without, again, using that foul language or violence, et cetera, things like that. Now, again, Ramsey, we said this numbers, I believe you said came from ADPH and a couple of other quick counties. And then we are going to leave these links here and get to answering some of these questions off air in the comments. Lee County is an interesting one, Ramsey. You're better to speak about that, but they had a very early surge in coronavirus cases. Now the percent fully vaccinated is 32.9%. And Lee County is interesting to me because it's right above Russell County, which is one of the lightest colors on this map, meaning it's one of the least vaccinated counties in the state.
Yeah. And I think Lee and counties like Tuscaloosa are really interesting because they're obviously the homes to Alabama's biggest university. So Lee County is where Auburn University is. And because of that, they have some of the youngest populations of any Alabama counties. And what we've seen in vaccination data is that young people are not getting the vaccine at nearly as high a rate as older people. So they're really the least likely to be vaccinated are, college age kids up through 30-year-olds, and then even continuing up through 50. So those younger counties we're really likely to see lower vaccination rates.
Last county we're getting to is Lowndes County, which is, I believe, the most vaccinated in the state of Alabama. That percent fully vaccinated is 38.1%. And interestingly, that percent with at least one dose is 52.2%. So that's the biggest gap we've seen so far when looking at this map. So that percent fully vaccinated here in a few weeks we'll assume that will go up if people who got their first dose return to get their second dose. A couple quick shout outs here. I know Grace, who mentioned earlier, she is a teenager. She is in high school, having to go back to school next week. She said she got her shot. She was a little bit scared, but she did it. And so Grace, thank you for watching. Good luck in school. Also, we have Pam who says she's lost 3 friends to COVID this month. We're thinking of you, Pam, thinking of everybody who has lost people to this virus or lost people in general. So again, all of this information is available on AL.com. All of these maps are going to be in Ramsey's story that is linked in this comment thread. And if you have questions about the vaccines, please email us at vaccines, VACCINES at AL.com. We will get your questions to the correct professional and get them answered. So Ramsey, thank you for coming on here today, breaking this down. And thank you all for dealing with me and having to look everywhere and get these maps up. So again, Ramsey, thanks. Everybody watching, thank you. Please be nice to each other, and we will see you tomorrow.